Hey everyone, it's Professor Nagel. We have a big assignment to do today. We're going to do exercises 13.1, 2, and 3 all in one video. And this is creating a customer maintenance app that uses classes. And then we'll get into, I think, overloading operators and then delegates and events. So open up 13.1 and let's get started. We're going to open the customer class. And we're going to update the first name, last name, and email properties, these right here, to use private fields and getters and setters with bodies instead of auto-implemented. So right now the private fields are hidden. You can't see them, but they're there. And the get and set accessors are auto-implemented, meaning it just returns that private field for the get and it sets the value for it on the set. And we are going to change the accessors to use full bodies and then add code to the setters that throws an exception if the value is greater than 30 characters. All right, so let's start by defining what these private fields are. So private, obviously, string, and then we have first name is equal to nothing. Private string last name is equal to nothing, and private string email is equal to nothing. So now these are my private fields, and my accessors need to use these private fields. So let's do this. We're going to take this property and break it up a little bit. Okay, so the get accessor is still just going to return first name. And notice first name is highlighted in Visual Studio. It's showing you that it is returning the private field first name. And set, what set's going to do is, well, let's just start with the easy part. It's going to set the private field. However, if the value that is coming in, if the length of that is greater than 30, then we are going to throw a new argument exception that says maximum length of first name is 30 characters. All right, so in this business class that we're dealing with right now, if the person's first name is greater than 30 characters, it doesn't allow that. And we would do that because, maybe our database has a field that is varchar 30, meaning it can hold anywhere from 0 to 30 characters. So we want to make sure that there's not going to be an error when we go to insert that first name into the database. Not so much an error, but the data gets chopped off. All right, so here's the thing. There's two ways that you can redo last name and email. You could step through it like we did for first name. But honestly, it's probably easier to take first name and copy it and then paste it twice for last name and email and change things. And that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to get rid of last name and email. And now I'm going to copy first name and say this is now last name. Okay? And then anywhere where it says first, change it to last. Make sure you get them all. So public string last name, get returns last name. Because here's the thing, like if it returns first name, it's not going to give you a syntax error here. It says, yeah, fine. If you ask for the property last name, I'll give you the private field first name. There's no syntax error with that. It's more of a logic error, logistical error. So make sure you get all those first names to last name. So that's last name. If last name's value.length is greater than 30, blah, 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 that's last name and that's last name. For set. Okay, we did last name, so of course let's now do email. Maximum length of email is 30 characters. That might be a little short, but I believe that's what we want to be set to. And make sure that when we get it, we get the email field, and when we set it, we set the email field. So that's one of those things, once you get it right once, copy paste, and there should be no red squigglies in your customer.cs code. And then we're going to test this. So I'm going to add a new user, Chester Tester, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's 10 characters. That's 10 characters. That's 10 characters. And now that's 31st character. I hit save. Sorry, that has to be a valid email address. All right. .at. I hit save and it threw an argument exception because I've sent in 31 characters and it threw this exception. All right, let's stop the application. And you know what? The one thing we forgot to check is make sure it works if it's under 30 characters. Okay, that was step 4, testing it. And then step 5, that's not ideal if someone's using your application and it throws an exception. So if we open up the Add Customer form, we can take these fields, and there's actually a property of these text boxes, which is maximum length. Currently it's 32,767. We're going to change it to 30. All right, and of course you can select multiple text boxes at once and change them all to 30 at the same time. So the max length of our text boxes are all 30. And now when we run our application, it will stop us at 30 characters. Like, I can't type any more characters. That's 30. All right. So it is limiting the user's input so we never even get that exception being thrown. Okay, and that was step 5. Step 6 is add a class named customer list. So project, add class. We're going to call this customer list. The C and the L are uppercase. And hit add. So I'm guessing, just like the last chapter, this internal needs to be changed to public. And declare a private variable that can store a list of customer objects. So in customer list, we're going to make a private list of customer. I like this name, so I'm a fan of having underscores in your private variable names. That indicates later in the code that it is private. But I'm going to follow along with how the book did the product list recommendation or example. And I'm just going to call this customers. So private list of type customer called customers. And then we're going to add the following members to the customer class. We have a constructor that is called when you create a new customer list. So public customer list. And when this is called, customers is going to be equal to a new list of customers. We also have a count property that indicates how many customer objects are in the list. So public int count, and that is just returning customers.count. And I'm just going to copy this from the book here and put this in as a comment. That's what that is. And then we need some methods. We need an add method that takes in a customer and adds the object to the list. So add takes a customer, named customer, and adds that customer to the list. Remove will remove a customer from the list. So it's going to be very similar to this, but I'm going to write this as an expression body. Okay, it's just one line. We take that customer and we remove the customer from the list. Doesn't return anything. So 2 different ways to write similar methods. And then fill and save. So fill will get the customers from customer DB and set that what that returns into customers. So public fill doesn't return anything, so it's also a void. And fill will run customer DB dot get customers, and we're going to put that into customers. So when you run customer list.fill, it calls customer db.getCustomers and stores that into customers. And then save. Public void save will run save. It runs customer db.saveCustomers, which does take an argument, and that is our private class level variable up here of customers. Okay, that was step 7. And make sure you add comments through here. Of course, you're going to be adding comments describing what the code is doing. And then modify the customer maintenance form to use this class. To do that, you'll use the fill and save methods of the customer list object instead of the methods of the customer DB class. So we come back to FRM customer. You can hit F7 because all I want to see is the code here. And I'm not going to be commenting or removing stuff. I'm going to comment stuff out just so we can see before and after. So instead of private list customer of customers, I'm going to say private customer list customers equals new, or equals new customer list. Either way, remember you don't need to define the class type both places, because obviously if I have a variable, class level variable called customers of type customer list, when I say give me a new something, obviously it's customer list. All right, so we don't need to define that twice. All right, now we have a whole bunch of errors, but that's okay. We can work through them. All right, so remember, customers is now our type customer list. And inside of that customer list is, if I come back here, is this private list. All right, so instead of calling customer db.getCustomers and then storing it into customers, we don't do that. All we need to do is say customers.fill. Okay, I'll come back to this one. This one's a little bit trickier, but here, when we save, instead of saving like this, we just say customers.save. All right, got a couple places to edit down there, but let's clean up this customers list. Actually, let's go back to the instructions. To do that, you'll need to use the fill and save methods of the customer list object instead of the methods of the customer DB class. Did that. In addition, you'll have to use a for loop instead of a for each loop when you fill the list box. So that's this section right here. I'm going to comment that out. And now I'm going to say for I int equals 0, I less than customers count I plus plus, lst customers dot items dot add add customers at spot I dot get display text. However, we have an error here, and I realized that as I built my customer list, the one thing I did forget was the indexer. Of course we need that. The indexer allows us to do this right here. It allows us to say, get the item at spot I from customers. All right, we kind of skipped over that. My bad. Let's come back and do that. The indexer uses the reserved keyword this. This particular indexer is going to receive an integer. And when you try to get using the indexer, we're just going to return customers at I. And when you set, customers I is equal to value. Okay, now obviously you could have, instead of just setting this here, we could have, and we might be doing this later, do some sort of validation. Okay, but for now, all we needed to do was just the quite simple customers I is equal to value. So this indexer now hopefully fixed this error. There we go. Now when we use customers at spot I, it will return the customer who is inside this private list, and then we run get display text on them. And by adding the indexer, it also updated this. Oh, here we have a customer DB. Save customers, we don't want to do that. We want to run customers.save. Okay, no red squigglies. Looks good. That would have been step 8, and step 9 is test it. So there's Chester Tester. I'll add myself, I'll exit, I'll run it again, make sure it saved it. It did. I'm going to remove Chester Tester. Exit, run it again. Everything is working wonderfully. So, my students, we're going to keep going. If you're not in my class and you need to submit 13.1 independently, this is where you would stop and submit 13.1. That was the end of 13.1. We are going to continue now into 13.2. And 13.2, we're back into the customer list and we're going to add overloaded plus and minus operators to the customer list class that add and remove a customer from the list. So back down here under my methods, I'm going to write in here overloaded operators. This is 13.2. So public static customer list operator, and yes, we want the plus operator. And when you think about what happens when you add something to the list, is on the left hand side, so it's going to be something like customers equals customers plus customer. Okay, or like this is my customer list, takes a customer list and a customer list. The two sides of the plus operator are going to be a customer list, that's this thing here, and a customer. All right, those are the two things. So let's actually add this customer to the list. So list.add the customer. And then the plus operator returns, what gets returned? The list. Okay, so that's how you determine what are the two arguments. It's the left-hand side of the plus operator and the right-hand side of the plus operator. And then what gets returned is the left-hand side of the equals. All right, and we can leave that in here. That might help you out later. And the minus operator or subtraction is actually very similar, so I'm going to copy paste that. And the operator now is minus. And if you think about how we would normally use it, it would be customers equals customers minus customer. So customer list is on the left-hand side of the minus, or subtraction sign, I should say. Customer C is on the right-hand side, and what gets returned is the list. And instead of adding that customer, we remove them. So these are the overloaded operators, so we can use it in our code like this, and then we need to modify the customer maintenance form to actually use this. So where do we add a customer? Oh, here's where we add a customer. And instead of customers.add, let me just break this up a little bit. This was part of 13.1. What we're going to do here is 13.2. So instead of running this customers.add, we're going to say customers is equal to customers plus customer. Or we can even say customers, if I can spell it right, plus equals customer. Even better. All right, so that's using the overloaded plus operator. When we say plus, it comes to the customer list. It says, oh, here's the plus. Okay, let's run this. Add the customer, return the list. It added this customer, return the list. And for deleting, let's do the same thing here. Give myself some room so we can say that this is part of 13.1. And what we're about to do is 13.2. Customers minus equals customer. Remove that customer from the list. Or again, you could have written out customers is equal to customers minus customer. I'm not a big fan of the minus equals. Don't use it very often. Plus equals to me makes sense because I use it quite often. Minus equals, I don't use it so often. I would probably write this one out this way. All right, so personally, my code would probably look like this. And then run the app again to make sure that this stuff worked. So we're going to add someone. It added them. I always like when we're dealing with databases to exit out and run the application again to make sure that data is saved. And then we can take Chester Tester and remove them. Okay. That is working wonderfully. And that was 13.2. So once again, my students, stay put because we're going to do all this together. If you're not in my class and your instructor asked you to submit 13.2 independently, this again would be where you stop, zip, submit. But then we're going to move on to 13.3. Okay, we're going to add a delegate named change handler to the customer list class. So come back to the customer list class. Towards the top here, we'll do it right after our constructor. Let's label that constructor, huh? So this is called change handler, customer list, customers. This delegate should specify a method with a void return type and a customer list parameter. So the parameter that's going to be going in is a customer list, and it's going to return nothing. So we can assign this delegate to any method that accepts a customer list as the only argument and returns void. Okay, and then we need to add an event. And we only have one event and only one delegate, but it's good to break them up into sections anyhow. So we have an event named changed, and that uses the change handler delegate. So it is what the delegate is, the name of the event, and this is equal to nothing. And it should be raised anytime the customer list changes. All right. So let's think about, when does the customer list change? Does the customer list change when you read a value from it? Nope. It definitely does not. All right, let's look at this. Does the customer list change when you set a customer? Yeah, it changes. Like if I take a customer in spot 2 and I change it, then the customer list has changed. So this is where, instead of using the expression body, let's take this customer's I equals value, cut that. Set, we're going to actually write out. We still use that customer's I equals value, but then we say if changed is not equal to null, then changed is this. All right, so this raises the flag that our customer list has been changed. So I was explaining to my class a few weeks ago that raising a flag is just like football in the NFL. When there's a problem, the referee takes their little yellow flag and they throw it in the air, and someone's watching for that. So our code later on is going to start watching for this flag to be thrown. All right, we're going to get there momentarily. Bear with me. But right now, we're just saying if you change one of the values in your list, then raise the flag. All right, where else do you change the list? If you add a customer, does that change things? Yes, it does. So we're going to take this whole if change is not equal to null, change is this, paste it in there. If you remove someone, does it change things? Yes, it does. Oh, by the way, we were using an expression body. Now we don't have room to do that. Okay, this is why I'm not a fan of expression bodies, because if you ever have to add something to it, you have to take the whole thing apart. Okay? To me, it would have been easier just to, look how easy it was to add this event flag raising to add. All we did was add one line. But for remove, we had to take out the lambda arrow operator, and then we had to put curly brackets in and all this stuff. I don't know. I think that when you code it the first time, you should just write it out. All right, let's come down here. When you use the plus operator and you try to run your code like this, does this change your list? It does, but it uses add, and add is already raising the flag, so we don't have to do it there. And the reason why we're not adding this flag in the fill method is because the fill method only runs once. That's when our application first loads. And yes, the customer list changes, but what we're eventually going to do is we're going to be listening for that flag to be raised. And when that flag is raised, we're going to save the data and then refresh the list box. And we don't need to save the data after we first load it, after the initial load. So, I had to look up why we're not raising the flag on fill, because in my mind, it has changed, but really you were going to load everything and then save it right back. With a text file that has 3, 4, 5 records, not a big deal. But when you have a massive database, it's a big deal. All right, so we're not going to raise the flag on fill. Okay, now we need to modify the customer maintenance form, FRM customer, to use the changed event to save the customers and refresh the box anytime the list changes. To do that, you'll need to code an event handler that has the same signature specified by the delegate. So if you remember, our delegate returns void and takes a list of customers. So I'm going to, where am I going to do this? I'm going to do this right after my FRM load. Private void, and I'm going to call this handle change, which takes a customer list of customers The name is handle change. It takes in a customer list and returns nothing, which is the exact same signature as my delegate. It takes in a customer list and it returns nothing. And what do we want to do when a change happens? We want to take customers and save it, and then we want to fill the customer list box again. Then you need to wire the event handler to the event, and that happens in the form load event handler. So if you don't know where that is, you could go to FRM customer, double click on it, and it takes you right there. Okay, let's see here. I forget what this was. This was part of 13.1. This was original code. All right, and then here is where we wire, and I'm going to just copy this, wire the event handler to the event. Okay, so we have customers is our customer list, dot changed, and we're going to add a wire to it. New customer list, dot change handler, and what is the method I want it to run? I want it to run handle change. So this is wiring the event together. So whenever the customer list changes, the flag gets thrown. This thing recognizes that the flag was thrown and says, hey, run handle change. Handle change saves the customer data and then fills the list box. So now for add and delete, when you add a user, this customer save and fill customer list box, you don't need to do that at all anymore. That's being handled by the event handler. So KC to comment those out, and delete, same thing, where you save and fill the list box, KC, comment those out. And notice there's a lot of stuff here, like you don't need to do this. And actually I don't want you to do this, but just look. I'm going to delete that code and delete that code. Those are all comments. This is all it's doing. If you go to delete someone, and then there's the confirmation, and you delete the customer, that's all you need to do. And customers then says, hey, I changed, and then it runs the, what do we call that thing? Handle change method, and it saves the customer list back to the text file and then refreshes the list box. Whereas previously, we had to explicitly say, save it and fill the customer list box. Okay, let's run this. Check it out. And as we're running this, like we should really see no changes. It's just more efficient code on the back end. So we're going to add Chester tester. And there it is. He's there. It got saved. All right, we can actually, there's two ways we can look. I can look at customers.txt. My students, that customers.txt is in your project folder. And you can see Chester testers right there. Or if you just run it again, there's Chester tester. If I delete it, go look at that customers.txt. Yep, it's gone. That was step 5. Okay, step 6. This method here, handle change. We are creating a method that is only being used once by this event handler. So instead of having a method and then wiring that method to the changed event of customers, what we could do, I'm going to take this wiring and comment it out. Instead, I'm going to say customers.changed, if I can spell it right, plus equals customers, and I'm going to make an anonymous function. And you run these 2 lines of code, and that needs a semicolon at the end. And now, notice my handle change method has 0 references. Okay, so I can comment all that out. So instead of this line up here and then this line down here, if this is the only place I was using that method was in the event handler, I can write this as a lambda expression or an anonymous function. Benefits to this, this method, when you have it in your code, it takes up a little bit of memory to hold that in space, whereas this way, it just runs when it needs to. The downside is I don't have a method now. So if I want to call handle change somewhere else, I can't do it because this is an anonymous function. It does not have a name. That was step 6. Always, especially a change like that, test it one more time. That worked. Take them, delete it. That worked. Okay, and that was 13-3. Now everyone can stop here, save everything, hit save all, shut down the app, zip it, submit it. Thanks for following along, and thanks for following on YouTube. We'll see you in chapter 14.